A 1991 Rolling Stone photo shoot captured Winona Ryder at the absolute peak of her early fame. She became the face of a generation by playing smart, unconventional characters instead of the typical girl next door. Many mistake the curved deck of the Titanic in photos as a sign of sagging or a flaw. That upward slope is actually a deliberate design called sheer, built to improve stability in rough seas and give the vessel a more graceful look. This isn't a trick photo. In 1982, artist Agnes Dens planted and harvested a 2-acre wheat field in Manhattan. The entire crop was grown on a landfill that would later become the multi-billion-dollar real estate of Battery Park City. A rare photo from the early 1970s shows a bearded Joe Biden, taken around the time he was a young county councilman. Just a couple of years later, he would launch his successful campaign for the U.S. Senate in Delaware. The wild chopper bicycles of the early 70s were often custom-built by kids using spare parts and welding skills. This one's extreme front fork, known as an ape hanger, was all about style, not practicality. Actress Tanya Roberts appeared as Kiri in the 1982 fantasy film The Beastmaster. The role, and its famously rugged costume, made her a staple of movie posters and magazines throughout the early 80s. A U.S. soldier clutches his rosary during the Battle of the Somme in 1916, one of the bloodiest battles in human history. This powerful image of faith in the trenches has since inspired the creation of modern combat rosaries for troops. Sean Connery takes a break for pasta while in Rome. Shortly before filming Diamonds Are Forever in 1971, he had to be coaxed back to the Bond role with a then-record salary of $125 million, which he donated entirely to charity. Demonstrating a new floor polisher in the 1950s required a professional and almost clinical appearance. These heavy, all-metal machines were built to last, a far cry from the plastic appliances of today. Italian actress Monica Bellucci poses for a photo shoot in 1992, just as her career was beginning to take off in European cinema. She wouldn't become a household name in America until her roles in The Matrix sequels and The Passion of the Christ a decade later. At a 1971 Inventors Exhibition in Brussels, a designer presents a vibrating health bra. The device claimed it could develop and firm up the wearer's bust through battery-powered pulses. Tourists in the 1870s were regularly allowed to climb the Great Pyramid of Giza, a practice now banned to preserve the ancient structure. Local guides would assist the climbers up the massive stone blocks for a small fee. The Oseberg ship, one of the best-preserved Viking longships ever found, is displayed at a museum in Oslo. Discovered in a burial mound, this ornate vessel was built around 820 AD and buried with 2 high-status women. Swedish-born actress Anita Ekberg serves up a Thanksgiving turkey in this 1960s publicity photo. She became an international star after her famous scene wading through Rome's Trevi Fountain in the film La Dolce Vita. Alexei Pajitnov, the creator of Tetris, poses with his son in Moscow shortly after the game became a worldwide phenomenon. Because he created it while working for the Soviet government, he received no royalties from the game's massive initial success. Raquel Welch's look in the mid-1960s often defined the era's vibrant, free-spirited style. This particular outfit became famous after she wore it in the 1967 film Fathom, cementing her status as a Hollywood sensation. A classic yellow cab, likely a Dodge Coronet, sits outside a New York City Burger King in the mid-1970s. The restaurant's groovy, striped design was the company's signature look before they switched to a more uniform brick and wood style. Charles Lindbergh stands with his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis, before his historic non-stop solo flight across the Atlantic. To save weight and increase fuel capacity, the plane was built without a forward-facing window, forcing him to use a periscope to see ahead. Actress Janet Leigh poses for a publicity still for the 1954 medieval adventure film The Black Shield of Falworth. This was 6 years before she would take her most famous role as Marion Crane in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. A young George Lucas stands with Mark Hamill on location in Tunisia, which served as the desert planet of Tatooine in Star Wars. The cast and crew battled sandstorms and harsh conditions to film these iconic scenes before the movie became a cultural phenomenon. Italian superstar Sophia Loren gives a kiss to her younger sister, Anna Maria Ciccolone, in 1955. Though Anna Maria also pursued an acting career, she never achieved the international fame of her celebrated older sister. Before the invention of automated ball collecting machines, some golf driving ranges employed a person in a wicker cage. This bizarre-looking suit was meant to protect the worker from being pelted by golf balls while they gathered them by hand. John Lennon shelters a friend from the rain, while Paul, George, and Ringo chat on a Paris street in 1964. Ringo's star is seen holding a small cat he had just bought for his future wife, Maureen. British model Jenny Clare shows off the popular miniskirt and minicar, two major cultural exports from London in the early 70s. The compact and affordable Mini became a symbol of the swinging 60s youth culture. Sophia Loren is seen here with her sister, Anna Maria, who was 4 years her junior. Sophia was fiercely protective of her family and used her fame and influence to help get them out of post-war poverty in Italy. This 1968 photo shows a young Victoria Principal, a full decade before she landed her career-defining role. She would become a household name playing Pamela Barnes Ewing on the hit primetime soap opera Dallas from 1978 to 1987. The surrealist painter Salvador Dali works on his 1940 masterpiece, The Face of War. He painted it in California after fleeing Europe, and the skull-filled eyes and mouth reflected his horror at the Spanish Civil War and the start of WW1. Walt Disney himself stands in the foreground, personally overseeing the construction of Disneyland's Sleeping Beauty Castle in 1954. The entire park was famously built on a tight schedule, going from an orange grove to a finished theme park in just 1 year. This 1941 photo was actually a piece of Japanese propaganda circulated during World War II. It shows two women mocking British Prime Minister Winston Churchill by holding their noses, a reference to his initials WC being slang for a toilet. British soldiers share their Christmas dinner in a shell crater during the Battle of the Somme, 1916. A small, simple cross stands behind them, a somber reminder of their grim reality even on a day of peace. In February 1954, Marilyn Monroe visited Korea to perform for over 100,000 U.S. servicemen. For the tour, she often dressed in a practical bomber jacket and military-style trousers, enduring the freezing weather alongside the troops. A sharply dressed David Bowie takes a smoke break by the pool of the Peninsula Hotel in Los Angeles. This photo was taken in 1983, the same year he released his best-selling album, Let's Dance, which propelled him to global superstardom. U.S. soldiers from an artillery unit fly a handmade peace flag over their camp near the Laotian border in 1971. The image captures the growing anti-war sentiment among the very troops tasked with fighting it. This record-breaking 425-pound Black Sea bass was caught by Edward Llewellyn off Catalina Island, California in 1903. At the time, Catalina was one of the world's most famous destinations for big game sport fishing. A French civilian pours a drink for an exhausted British soldier shortly after the D-Day landings in Normandy, 1944. Small acts of kindness like this were a common sight amidst the rubble and destruction of the campaign. The Mercedes-Benz W125 Record Wagon was a streamlined race car built specifically for breaking speed records. In 1938, it hit an astonishing 268 miles per hour on a public highway, a record that stood for nearly 80 years. Actor Des Webb stands on the snowy set of The Empire Strikes Back in the massive Wampa costume. The suit was made from real yak fur and was so heavy that it had to be supported by a crane between takes. These two photos show the dramatic transformation of the Dubai Marina from a sparse desert coastline in 2000 into a dense forest of skyscrapers today. The massive development project was built around a man-made canal, turning the desert into a waterfront city. A recently discovered workout log from 1965 shows Bruce Lee's training regimen, which focused on high repetitions with surprisingly light weights. His goal was to build functional strength and lightning-fast speed, not just bulky muscle. Jack Nicholson's trademark grin is on full display in this 1978 photograph taken around the peak of his fame. He was fresh off iconic roles in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and was about to film The Shining. Construction of the U.S. Capitol's cast-iron dome continued throughout the Civil War at the insistence of President Lincoln. He saw the project as a powerful symbol that the Union itself would endure and be completed. A photo from 1850 shows the Notre Dame Cathedral surrounded by the undeveloped working-class riverbank of the Seine. By 2016, the same spot had been transformed into a stone quay and park with a bustling modern city behind it. This 1952 photo shows Marilyn Monroe working out with dumbbells, a practice she took up long before it was common for women. She was a promoter of physical fitness and understood the importance of strength, not just glamour. A Bulgarian soldier lets out a fierce battle cry for the camera during World War I. Staged photographs like this were often used as propaganda to boost morale and project an image of strength back home. The original 7 astronauts of NASA's Project Mercury pose for a group portrait in their iconic silver spacesuits. These men were all military test pilots who became instant national heroes in 1959, representing America's hopes in the space race against the Soviet Union. A young Stephen Hawking stands with his first wife, Jane, shortly after their wedding in 1965. This was just 2 years after his diagnosis with ALS, when doctors gave him only a couple of years to live. Workers stand on the innovative prefabricated floor trusses during the construction of the World Trade Center in the late 1960s. This design allowed for vast open office spaces without interior columns, but later became a focal point in understanding the tower's collapse. Before phone lines were buried, the sky above many American towns looked like this web of wires in the early 1900s. A lineman is perched precariously on the pole. A common sight when connecting a community to the outside world was a manual job. Roller skaters show off the typical Venice Beach style from the disco craze of the late 1970s. The era was defined by short shorts, tube socks, and a carefree attitude that made the boardwalk a famous cultural hotspot.